it, but it was in. Not a lot of tornadoes in Miami. Okay, thank you. Welcome to the second day of Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development. Hammer Diamondville, Wyoming. First up on our agenda, Dr. Holly Krypta. Please come to the table, and you've got Randall with you as well, or just to get started? Okay. Thank you to both of you. Dr. Holly, you were on the news this morning, local radio station, University of Wyoming, getting some funding, and you're going to go after some even new technology, even more technology. Thank you.
Hey.
Time over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And that's great news. Didn't hear it, so appreciate you telling me about it. And we're just thrilled. And as they say, now the work begins. So Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Holly Krypta, Executive Director of the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. Here with me is Randall Luthey, Chief Energy Advisor for Governor Gordon. To get that right. Okay. I was asked to speak about three things this morning, and you heard from my great colleague, Dr. McLaughlin, yesterday. So today, I'll just give a little bit of an overview of what the School of Energy Resources is doing, and then talk about the administration of the Integrated Test Center, Carbon Safe, and MTR. So those were the three things I was asked to talk about. Okay, so I always start presentations with this slide. Our mission at the School of Energy Resources is energy-driven economic development for Wyoming, and this is what drives what we do every day. We are under the guidance of the Energy Resources Council and want to acknowledge the two members that are here. One is Mr. Luthey, the other is the co-chairman, and they keep us focused on our mission. Our research structure is how we carry out this mission. So we have centers of excellence. So the CO2 storage work that you're hearing about is all housed under Dr. McLaughlin, leader and director of the Center for Economic Geology Research. I'm not going to go through all of these, but the point is, what I want you to know is that we have a very robust group, very multidisciplinary, and we're tackling all sectors and all angles for Wyoming's energy sector. So next slide. This is just a partial list of some of the things we're working on. And I think it's important. What I want you to know is we have these really exciting, big carbon storage grants, but it's not all we're doing because the Wyoming energy sector and the state is really robust in terms of its energy and minerals opportunities. And so we're pursuing lots of different things. Some are at the earlier stages, so you might not hear about them as much, but we are pursuing a number of different topics. So just running through this list really quickly, our two flagship areas are at the top. So that's carbon capture, use, and storage. And the reason we're undertaking that was really covered well yesterday. So it is a way, given that Wyoming exports 93% of our energy, this is a way for us to work with hopefully Wyoming's customers in continuing our fossil fuel production, even as our customers choose to have lower carbon products in their energy sector. In addition, this in its own right is an economic development opportunity for Wyoming. So we're starting to do some research on understanding the revenue that would be generated from the state from these CCUS projects. And it's really early in that work, but we're really trying to quantify that. Our other big area is our carbon engineering program, which I think many of you are familiar with. It's the coal to non-energy products. And so that's our other flagship area, but there's a lot more. So we are, thanks to the support of the legislature, announcing phase 2 of the Mowry project, which is our big oil and gas research program. It's very multidisciplinary at UW. Folks, particularly in petroleum, energy and petroleum engineering department and geology and geophysics, working together to unlock Wyoming's largest unconventional reservoir. So we're really excited about that. We're launching phase 2 of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Krypta, could you go into a little bit on the benefit, if we can unlock the Mowry, that it would have for the state, the amount of oil, the amount of money that sort of thing? Just briefly, please.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. So we're looking at estimates. So of course, part of the project is really trying to narrow down the potential resource, but we're estimating about 300 million barrels of untapped oil in the Mowry. But the lessons we learn, so we're focused initially on the Powder River Basin and oil in the Powder River Basin, but the lessons, the technical things we learn could extend more broadly across the state. So the Mowry is a formation that underlies the entire state. So the lessons that we learn could also help with natural gas production in the west part of the state. Okay.
Continue.
Okay. We also have a visualization center, which is really important to helping us. I use it as, I describe it as art that can be used to explain complex energy topics. This is going to be really important for our public outreach efforts on describing some of these energy issues and the technologies that are being developed. We have our Center for Air Quality that's worked with Wyoming gas producers on methane detection and mitigation, and producers that are you raising your hand?
Well, I was waiting for you to end it.
Okay, sorry.
Let's
Yeah.
go to Representing Conrad. They're full of questions.
Chairman, thank you. Dr. Kutka, can you, as recently as last week, I had the opportunity, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, to look at the next evolution of your coal bricks? Unbelievably exciting. And if you could just share for the rain or the panel here, where we're at on that coal bricks. I mean, it's powerful, and we would solicit a brick a piece if you could, so we could promote, but it was extremely exciting to hear.
Doctor?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad. So where we are in that project is we have generation 2 and 3. We're trying to see how much coal char we can get and still maintain the integrity of the bricks. So, it's still very much, we're trying to optimize those. We're also working on so the first generation of bricks were hand pressed. Now we're going to use the commercial approach to making them use actual compression machinery. And we are in the process of, again, thanks to legislature, of building a coal pyrolysis demonstration that will make the char at much larger scale than we've been able to make historically. And that way we can produce many more of these bricks and other materials like our soil amendments. So there's quite a few products we're making from that char. And so we're moving forward on building that demonstration of the process that makes the feedstocks. So really exciting all around. And so we're still moving forward on all that.
Doctor, I have a quick follow-up to that. What's the point that we can move that out into the commercial sector? I mean, we've got one group here that's talking about possibilities here. What moves us into that next stage where we're actually producing it and we've got business?
Okay, good question, Mr. Chairman. So our demonstration is the last step needed to collect the data that would be needed to engineer a commercial facility. So that we're in the last step of like research, development, and demonstration now, but we're at the front side of that step. We are just starting construction, or really site prep, and then construction of this demonstration. And so we'll need to operate that for, I would say, minimum of 1 year before we can have all the data and make sure we've optimized our system and optimized the char properties. So I would think we need to be working with commercial partners over the next year, but maybe it would be 2 or 3 years before they can start building a system and ultimately producing. So that would be a couple of years after that.
Thank you. We've sidetracked you a couple of times now. Let's get you back on.
Okay. So I think I don't want to miss this point on methane detection, where the Center for Air Quality and the Department of Atmospheric Sciences at the university has worked with Wyoming producers, Pure West and Jonah Energy. And of course, there's been a ton of work by the DEQ, really a true leader in supporting or engaging with our producers. And now, because of all that work and all that collaboration, Wyoming has the lowest methane intensity natural gas in the western half of the US. And both Jonah and Pure West have actually been able to monetize that as a value. So that's something that now collaboration between university researchers, industry, and engagement with DEQ has led to a really positive outcome for Wyoming's energy sector. Okay, so we are working on a number of other things. I'm going to go quickly, but policy and economics is really important. With the new EPA rules that are coming out, it's important to understand the value of the existing coal-fired power plants and natural gas-fired power plants that they're providing. So we are working on a study now in the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis on the reliability of the electrical grid in the US. Most people don't realize that we've been improving reliability of the electric sector in this country for decades, and now it is decreasing because we're adding more variable resources and we're not backing them up appropriately. So we need to retain our baseload generation, and so we're doing a study to demonstrate how those baseload resources and really dispatchable resources support the electrical grid. And so that's underway now. Other areas, we have our Hydrogen Energy Research Center, which is growing, looking at ways for approaches long duration energy storage. What could this mean to Wyoming? We are growing the work in our nuclear sector. So we have our Nuclear Energy Research Center really focused on capacity building, getting faculty across UW to work on nuclear related topics. Thanks to INL and our collaboration with them, we'll be offering a Fundamentals of Nuclear Energy course in the fall for the first time. And we're looking at how to build a certificate for students after that. We have a Center for Produced Water Management that's really world-class. Lots of different applied geologic research like precious metals. I already mentioned, I think maybe I skipped it. Rare earths also and critical minerals is a big area for us. And Wyoming has those. So interested in the economic development opportunities around that. And we undertake studies that the legislature asks us to do, like CO2 and concrete, high-grade graphite, and things like that. So next slide. Okay, so I will get to the topics that I was asked to talk about at this point. So next slide, please. The Wyoming Integrated Test Center is one of 2 test centers in the US, and it has some real advantages. And before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge Jason Beggar, who's here today and is managing director of the Integrated Test Center, has really stewarded this facility. And it took a while. COVID caused some problems, but that facility is now scheduled to be just about full. So, and what this facility does, it's a test center for carbon capture technology. So we've heard a lot about storage. This is on the capture side. So technology developers need a place to test their technologies on real flue gas. Testing them in the lab, it's not as accurate. And it's really hard to do that when you get to large scale. So the Integrated Test Center offers the largest flue gas access in the country. So there's 2 test centers. This one has about 20 megawatts equivalent of flue gas that can be used for testing capture technologies. And so, okay, Mr. Chairman, I think my partner in crime would like to say something.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Randall Luthia, Energy Advisor for Governor Gordon, and thank you for the opportunity to join Dr. Krupka. It's an absolute honor. I will be here all morning playing second chair to a bunch of people, and I couldn't be happier because thanks to a lot of your efforts, we really have put together a great energy-related team. And I would just touch a little bit on SER and ITC. And you've heard the programs that SER is working on. I hesitate saying it, but I have a rather long history in Wyoming, and particularly when I was in the legislature, some of the same issues that I think you hear today about the University of Wyoming, that the University of Wyoming doesn't always reflect many of the values that people in Wyoming think it should. However, I can tell you the School of Energy Resources, if you have seen, does not fall into that category at all. Under their effort, you have seen faculty coordinated, coalesce, move around, actually get focused on particularly energy-related projects that are important to Wyoming. The ITC is certainly one of those, and it's absolutely, we consider it the premier center for carbon capture. Yesterday we spent a lot of time, you spent a lot of time listening and talking about carbon capture, but frankly, you may have a place to put it. First of all, you need a place to get it. And therefore, that's the carbon capture side. So you've got to find out how to catch the CO2, capture it, do something with it, either make it a product, a user for EORI, or sequester it. And that's what ITC is able to do. The ITC has gone through a bit of an evolution in the last stage, or hopefully not the last stage, but the last known stage of that evolution was in March 7th when the governor signed a delegation letter. The ITC has been delegated to the governor's office, to the infrastructure authority, to the Wyoming Energy Authority, and now has been delegated to the School of Energy Resources. And we think that's an excellent match because so much of that is almost, I would say, much research related and practice, and it seems to fit in well there. And so with that, I'm just going to turn it back. I'm going to sit back and enjoy Dr. Krutka and her continued presentation.
Mr. Luthi, before we have you turn it back, the committee may not be aware, a couple of 3 weeks ago, I fired up the old high mileage Durango and drove 9 hours out we had a Japanese delegation there. Tell the committee what that was all about and why that's important to us.
Absolutely. Dr. Krutka and Jason both mentioned, that they're nearly full, meaning that there are now projects up there. Particularly a few weeks ago was the groundbreaking of MTR and Kawasaki Heavy Industries, which are two different technologies that's going to be tested about how do we capture the carbon out of flue gas from the Dry Fork station. So you've got international cooperation and you've got cooperation among, very private companies and research as well. Again, the promise is amazing. What will we find out? I mean, and I'll step back just a little bit. Many will say carbon capture isn't ready. We only got one technology that's been tested, and that's the amine technology in Petra Nova. Expensive? Yes. Did it work? Yes. Did the business plan work for that particular project? No. But the more we test and look at different technologies, that gives us more options to work with carbon capture, particularly on coal-fired plants. What we're going to need is some time. Unfortunately, I guess this is my soapbox opportunity. Sorry, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. The federal government is somewhat disjointed in their approach to carbon capture. You see a lot of support for sequestration, like we saw yesterday. Great. You hear a lot of vocal support for carbon capture on coal-fired plants, but frankly, it's not there. And we're fighting for it every step of the way to try and get the funding, the backing necessary to get that technology and test new technologies. We'll talk later about the governor's energy matching fund. And certainly our goal at the end of your morning is how all these different programs that Wyoming has that many of you created are working together to move forward with energy projects.
Thank you, Dr. Krutka. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going to the next slide, just a little background on how the Integrated Test Center was initially stood up. So the state of Wyoming put in 15 million, Tri-State Generation and Transmission, a rural electric co-op, put in 5 million, and then NRECA, which is the National Rural Electric Association, put in 1 million. And so that funding is still carrying through to today. There was, as of the end of January, there's still about 4.8 million of that cumulative pot and there's a site reclamation cost of 706. So the facility doing what it's currently doing, offering these opportunities for technology developers is funded through the end of its life. At this time. So we're continuing to look at that. And one thing I just want you to know is that this is really important for the technology development. So I think there's two ways to bring down the cost of carbon capture, the capture side, which is the most important part or most expensive part of carbon capture. One is the amine technologies that are currently commercially available. We just need to have more projects. We'll bring down costs through learning by doing, but simply just by having more projects and economies of scale. So that will bring down costs on the capture side. And the other is having new and different technologies, not just a few vendors. So on this slide, you can see tenants of the Integrated Test Center who are moving forward. MTR is, I'll talk about what MTR is working on in a later slide. They're the largest tenant, and they are scheduled to begin construction next month in June and testing in 2024. This looks like alphabet soup, but each of these acronyms represents a company with a different technology that is being tested at the Integrated Test Center. And I'll just leave the slide with it for the committee at your pleasure to review, so we can continue going. Okay, so the governor delegated authority of the Integrated Test Center to the School of Energy Resources, and I was asked to talk about how we're executing on that transition. So our approach, number one, first and foremost, we have tenants moving in, so we need to ensure a very smooth transition. As what we proposed in terms of structure of administration is that contracting wise, the service contracts will be with the University of Wyoming and the School of Energy Resources. Then the leases will be with there's a lease for the ITC land from Basin Electric, which is the host power plant for the Integrated Test Center. And so the leases for that lease and then the tenant lease as well be with the governor's office. As far as finances, the funding is still with the Wyoming Energy Authority. We propose to keep it there and treat it like a sponsored project, which is a structure we're all very familiar with. WEA does support other projects in SCR as well. And so what we're doing is formalizing and we're creating an MOU just to outline this. So that's where we are now, but we're making sure that we're still providing support even as these details on administration are worked out. I already mentioned, I think, if the ITC continues on its current path, available funds are likely sufficient. I also think one of the things that you should know about the Integrated Test Center is we want to help technology developers scale up, but ultimately success for us is not just research and demonstration projects, it's getting a technology that will work for Basin Electric at the commercial scale. So this facility eventually shutting down and being replaced with a commercial facility is our ultimate goal. So, going down that path to the current end date of the Integrated Test Center, we're hoping that it will close and it will be replaced by a commercial capture plant. There may be opportunities for federal funding. We're obviously working on that all the time. And we will continue to keep our eye on if there's federal funds applicable for the Integrated Test Center. Our carbon safe wells are just a few thousand feet away. So there's probably some opportunities for synergy, and we'll keep an eye on all that. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we back up a little bit? You went through it fast and I want to make sure I understand it. You mentioned something about an MOU, School of Energy Resources, the governor's office, and the Energy Authority. Can you tease that
Yes.
out again? That's really confusing to me.
Yeah, sorry, I should have a diagram. So Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, so, okay, administration of the facility is a little complicated because of well, it's just a little complicated, but I think the entities involved are comfortable. So the idea is that service contracts, so SCR is responsible for administration of the Integrated Test Center. For us, that means I think we need to own the service contracts at the university. So folks working on site would be reporting to us. Folks doing communications related to the ITC would be reporting to us through these contract structures. So that's one set of contracts that would be with UW. The leases, and I believe this is due to the statutory language, will be with the governor's office. And their leases are longer term, especially the lease with Basin Electric. So the leases will be at the governor's office. Is that okay so far? Okay. And then the money that I talked about, it's already at the Wyoming Energy Authority. It would be unusual. We don't have like a bank account at the School of Energy Resources that we administer now. So that is the funds for the ITC are either in CDs or in a bank account. And so our proposal is just to keep the funds right where they are and treat it like a sponsored project. So that's like all our other research projects, including some funded by the Wyoming Energy Authority. So we will invoice the Energy Authority for the actual costs we incur under those service contracts. And they will send us the money that we invoice. And that's how we expect it to work. And I think, I'm comfortable with this approach where we work really closely with the governor's office and the Energy Authority. So Do you have any other questions or concerns about
Senator
that?
Ellis, you good?
Mr. Chairman, just a concern. It just seems like there's a lot of players in there. And if you're working with a company, I just really get concerned when you're like, no, that's them. No, that's them. You know, I think a better approach would be to have less players when you're reviewing contracts and have it all kind of centralized. So everybody knows what each hand's doing.
Mhm.
When you have three hands in there, is there a cleaner way to set that up?
Dr. Krutka, we're going to let you respond to that first. The co-chair wants to throw in another
Okay.
question.
Mr. Chairman,
Let's throw in his question and then you're going to.
oh, both.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question as the history. The monies were originally given by the legislature to the governor's office. The legislature has never changed that. So that's why you have to have part of this, maybe a little strange method of handling the money, because it still technically resides with the governor. And that's part of the reason for these changes. The legislature has never chosen to go in and make those changes. So that's why we're dealing with what we've done. They're dealing with what we've done over the years.
So
Senator, follow up.
follow up
that,
your
then we'll go back
question.
to Dr. Krutka, go ahead.
Mr. Co-Chair, then that's what I'm trying to understand is if we need to do something to make that work better. Instead of saying, well, the legislature never changed it. It's like, well, do we need to change something to make that administration less clunky?
Now it's yours, Dr. Krutka.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and I think my colleague here will answer part of that. I will say, just to give you some comfort, from the company's point of view, they will not see the Wyoming Energy Authority side of this. So that funding is between UW, SER, and WEA. So that the companies won't see. They will see the two partners. They will see the governor's office with the lease, and then us with this on-site support. So it's from a company's point of view, I think it's more simple than three. And Mr. Chairman.
Luthi?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, what I would suggest is we've been working on this for a few months now. I would suggest let's see how this works. We believe it will. The WEA funding side is probably the most simple of it. WEA just keeps track of the funds. They know where they are, and then they're invoiced as the SER spends the money and the companies get it. There might be more conversation on whether the governor's office should hold the lease, but right now I do believe the original legislation required that it be held by the state of Wyoming. So that seemed to be, and then at that time, that program was given by the legislature to the governor's office. The leases are normally longer term. You don't change them every, couple of years. They're generally multi-year leases. So I'd like to just see if this works. And then, but I'm not hesitant about asking you guys to make things better.
Go ahead.
Now, on the lease point, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Luthi, I think the governor's office is an odd entity to hold the lease. Usually I find comfort when we do that with other state agencies, Office of State Lands, like those, they're in the business of doing long-term leases. I don't know the universe and the extent the governor's office engages in that. So that's where that sounds really bizarre to me, but.
Any more follow-up, Mr. Luthi, or are we gonna?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Legitimate question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize if this question has already been addressed, but how long do you expect the funding you currently have to last? I mean, in years, terms of years or months, how does that look?
Either one of you.
Okay, so including reclamation. So the tenants will be able to test, and then reclamation is returning the site to its original state, which we hope will not happen because we're going to be hopefully building a commercial facility. But let's just say that the land does get reclaimed to its original state, that would be through 2029.
Okay, good question, Representative Larson. Go ahead.
Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments about the ITC in the interest of time, I'll move forward to Carbon Safe. So as asked to talk about Carbon Safe, I'll move quickly. So just for the background of the committee, Carbon Safe, the SAFE part stands for Storage Assurance Facility Enterprise, and that was an acronym invented by the feds. But this is essentially a large Department of Energy program really working on the commercial development of CO2 storage hubs. So I'll leave the slide 11 with the committee and just keep going to talk about what we are working on with the School of Energy Resources. So our, well, I guess I can't say our largest project anymore. So until this week, our largest project was the Wyoming Carbon Safe Project Phase 3. So we've been through 2 phases before. It's adjacent to Basin Electric's Dry Fork Power Plant. That is also the home of the Integrated Test Center. That is one of the nation's newest and best, I would say, coal-fired power plants. So Basin Electric has been an incredible partner in this. There are 2 wells completed to Class 6 standards already under this program and under this project. And now what is happening is the team under Dr. McLaughlin is evaluating the other storage sites and planning for storage sites. So we won't build any more wells under this project, Phase 3, but we will understand where we would put more wells as we move forward to a commercial hub. And so we have the 2 existing wells completed to Class 6 standards, some of the only such in the country, and 10 total injection wells are being designed, and they're still working on the placement of the monitoring wells. So this is all being built with the intention of being a commercial CO2 storage hub. Can we keep going to the next one? Okay, so another Carbon Safe project that was recently announced is the Hero Basalt Carbon Safe project. This is in Oregon. Why are we doing a project in Oregon? Because the CO2 is from natural gas originating in Wyoming. And so there's a natural gas fired power plant, and we're focused on developing a CO2 storage hub in Oregon to hold that CO2 and hopefully keep that plant operating. Our partners in that project are Oxy, PNNL, and Calpine, and others. And then just this week, I don't have a slide, but we announced the Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub that is focused on industrial CO2. And it's really exciting. We're excited about the Oregon project. It's really exciting to have 2 carbon storage hubs, one in the southwest part of Wyoming, one in the northeast. So and then we have the pipeline going between. So we're really starting to build out this infrastructure in the state. And of course, you can see from the presentation yesterday why we're so excited about working with Frontier Carbon Solutions.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where exactly will that Sweetwater one be located?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so it is, I think Dr. McLaughlin is the best person to answer that. Just outside of Granger is what I am hearing.
love that happens on the House and Senate floor too. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I have.
Go ahead.
So with the pipeline, it effectively connects the 2, but how much more pipeline would need to actually connect the 2 points out of curiosity? And is that something that's being planned to have a true direct connection between the 2 hubs, assumably?
Go ahead, Doctor.
So they're designed for specific sources is what I'm hearing from behind me. So I don't think extending the pipeline is necessarily part of these projects, but there are efforts around pipelines. And in fact, in the same announcement, there was some pipeline fund, Wyoming CO2 pipeline work that the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute will be involved in. So that is not part of these, but that is certainly something that we should be looking at in the future. And ultimately, we would want a robust network, but these projects are focused on creating hubs in those areas focused on specific emission sources. So not quite there yet, but I do think it's something important. And then, of course, as you're well aware, we have the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative that puts Wyoming in a really great spot in terms of pipeline development.
You good?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Krupke, you made a comment just a few minutes ago about the project in Oregon, that it's to dispose of CO2 from a power plant that uses Wyoming natural gas. Just in a few minutes, could you expand on really the benefits all this work is doing for Wyoming's industries, please?
Yeah, our goal is, again, because Wyoming exports 93% of our energy, we want to support that energy sector in every way possible. And we're looking at customer requirements and lower carbon footprint as part of that. So we want to enable technologies that allow Wyoming's fossil fuels to continue being produced and used even in a carbon constrained world. And so why are we focused on Wyoming? Number one, we can control it, what happens here. And even though we don't use that much of our energy that we produce in the state within the state, we can demonstrate these technologies. We can help bring down the costs. And then we can bring folks here to show that this is part of the future energy mix. This is viable technology. And so that's why, I mean, we're trying to, and then I also commented that it in its own right, carbon capture, use and storage is an economic development opportunity. So there's two lines to this. We're trying to demonstrate these technologies in the state to show that it works. But ultimately, we have to move outside of the state. And so that Oregon project is an early example of us doing that. We've developed the expertise. We have world-class experts here in Wyoming, but we can't only work inside the state borders if we really want to support Wyoming's energy sector. And so that Oregon project is one example of us starting to step outside the state. And I have another one that through support from Peabody, we are working with Wyoming's largest, usually I think sometimes largest coal miner, to reach out to PRB customers outside Wyoming and do pre-feed assessments on CO2 storage opportunities around coal-fired power plants outside the state. So that is a second initiative that we're just launching, again, with the support from Peabody to try to help Wyoming's energy customers have access to this technology, and they might not have collaborations with experts in their own states. So we're trying to reach out more broadly.
Thank you. Let me have Mr. Luthi follow up, and then we're going straight to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Co-Chairman. Just to add a little bit of color to that, if we talk about coal, only about 10% of Wyoming's coal is used in Wyoming power plants. So if you can imagine, if we are able to develop a technology that works at Dry Fork, why won't it work at a power plant in Illinois, in Indiana, in Texas? And if we're really serious, if the world is serious about, greenhouse gases and CO2 emissions, I don't look for a lot of countries outside the United States to significantly reduce their coal-fired plants. So if we can have technology that works in Texas and Illinois and Indiana, it should work in places like China as well.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really glad that Chairman Burkhart kind of spotlighted this because we heard a lot yesterday. Make sure I'm connecting the dots well here, that about sort of the struggles in technology for retrofitting in a number of areas, but certainly in the coal area of going there and being able to capture carbon. And obviously it's being used there. And so, I'm kind of connecting some dots here about why this is so important to reach out and offer this to the actual end users of Wyoming coal. Am I seeing that right?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay, absolutely fantastic.
Good. A lot happening. Representative Larson and Granger project, get up to speed. That's just up the road from you. I was wishing it was a little further north, but you got a great opportunity there. So. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it's a very large storage hub, so I'm sure we could look at
Sure.
other opportunities. So, okay. The last topic I was asked to talk about was MTR. So MTR stands for Membrane Technology and Research. It is the company developing a membrane-based CO2 capture technology that is the largest ever technology tested at the Integrated Test Center. And they are just about to start construction at the Integrated Test Center. They're a great collaborator in several different projects in Wyoming. So they have the first large-scale pilot project at the Integrated Test Center, and that's a 10 megawatt equivalent of flue gas that they're treating. There's a FEED study underway to understand what it would cost to deploy this at commercial scale at the Dry Fork Power Plant. They are collaborators with us on our Wyoming Carbon Safe project, and we have submitted a proposal with them for a commercial demonstration funding from the Department of Energy. And what's interesting about MTR is that because it's membrane-based, it's very modular. So this really is, even though it's only 10 megawatts, this is the last step needed before they can really scale up substantially to commercial scale. So that is where we are with that technology. And that commercial demonstration, it's a concept paper at this time it's a full proposal. It's under review. So we'll see where DOE comes out on that one. And and I just also wanted to acknowledge Basin Electric. They are a huge partner in all this. We can't move forward on a lot of these projects until we have a partner, and they've been wonderful to work with for a long time. So, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
You want to transition into the next subject then, or? Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Dr. Kutka, on slide 4, I mean, it's an incredible portfolio of research topics. Is there any work being done at the ITC as it relates to CCR, coal combustion residual, and what uses can be done? Again, it's a large issue in Wyoming as well as the United States.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, I don't think there's any work at the ITC on that topic, but we do have several projects in that space. So for example, we have a project with National Energy Technology Lab looking at extracting rare earths from fly ash. We also, as part of our carbon engineering program, where the coal bricks are being produced, we're actually trying to use all the parts of the coal. So I didn't really talk about that, but fly ash is part of that. So of course, as you know, it's used already about, I think it's more than 50% is used in concrete today, but we're looking at using it in flooring, tiles, and other components as part of that program. So I should have said that our goal as part of that program is to use every piece of the coal.
Thank you. Good. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the future of Wyoming, and I think it's great. I'm just curious, are we seeing students in these programs going into these fields, staying in Wyoming, or are we losing them to other states and other private industries?
Dr. Creighton.
Great question. So in general, so we also have an undergrad academic program. Several of our students, so we train students to be landmen and energy and environmental systems experts, and we do see several staying in the state. We also lose a lot. So it's a mixed bag. I will say the School of Energy Resources is a hirer of UW grads. Most of our employees are UW grads, and our goal would be that some of these students, they're the experts in these technologies. So the idea is if we can get them commercialized, and a lot of the time we'll bring them on right after graduation, before they look at the market and see how much they can make working other places, and have them working on these technologies, and then ultimately, hopefully they can work in a commercial project down the line. So that's our goal, but I still think, yeah, we are losing students, but we also retain them with our research portfolio. But our goal is to retain them long-term in the state when we commercialize these technologies.
Correct. Wouldn't it be important then all the more to remain a leader in this? I was thinking about a conversation I had with a group of students at one of our many meetings over the Rochelle Center this past year, and some were headed out. You can't hold those who want the big city, but if we remain a leader and we bring them into all this new technology, there's a better chance of keeping those students in Wyoming. I can't figure out why you'd want to live anywhere else other than Wyoming, but that's the way it is. So, okay, you want to transition to the next one?
Okay. So I am not on the next one, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay, before you leave.
Okay.
here's a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something Professor Rothfuss said yesterday in our conversations, says we're going to be using phrases, words, and things that we won't even know in 5 years from now. Kind of fits into his blockchain work, but all of this is change rapidly. And that was my thought as I drove home to pet my golden retriever Cheyenne last night and feel comfortable for a little while. Give us an overall summary of where you see this going. And I know it's hard, but where you see this going, we are at a pivotal point as a state to land a lot, to accomplish a lot, and put Wyoming as the leader across the globe on this. Everything from capture to nuclear to everything else to how we're going to use the coal product, everything. Before you leave, give us a summary statement about 5 years from now, experiencing what we may not even know what to say, give us a summary statement before you leave the table.
Ooh, okay. Mr. Chairman, I believe that we are, as a state, on the cusp of commercialization of carbon capture, use and storage. That's why the projects are so large now, and that's why we have so many industry partners. So I think where we are is that technology is going to progress to commercialization. I believe Wyoming is a leader and will remain a leader. And it's largely because of the regulatory structure that this committee has set up over the years, and the support for the School of Energy Resources and the support for DEQ and the expertise there and our partners across the state. So I think that is moving forward, and other technologies are behind it. So I think the future is bright. We're in research, so we expect some failures. Not everything we're working on will be successful. My big concern with a lot of this is maybe not as much CCUS, but permitting challenges. So permitting reform is really important at the federal level for Wyoming to be successful, given the amount of federal lands we have in the state and federal minerals. But I do think some of these are moving forward, and we'll see which ones. But I think carbon capture, use and storage is really, we are actively handing off the baton right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate follow-up, really.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Kuka, I wanted to follow up from yesterday's discussion about the tax credit. Again, I think a great idea has been proposed. I think there might be other options as well, but to try to make up for those that use it, they're not using it for permanent storage, CO2. And don't then get the benefit of that 45Q. I think Mr. Obermuller mentioned yesterday about possibly you doing an analysis, of the School of Energy Resources, because even when it first came up and I read the materials, I was thinking, who could do that kind of analysis? And I do think you guys are uniquely qualified to give us as a legislature a little feedback on that option proposed yesterday, plus possible other options of what are the both fiscal impact of the state and economic impact together. So I just want to follow up with that and ask, do you think that's something you could get us by the next meeting so we can pursue that? Because again, in that area of making, incentivizing, I think that discrepancy there for those that inject it and not for permanent storage is really a valid point. So I'm just wondering about that, following up.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lally, we will do as the committee asks. So we're happy to help. And that conversation, Mr. Obermuller already brought that to our attention, and the conversation has started. I don't think the study has started. And so it's just a matter of us prioritizing, and we'll just make sure that we get to work on that. And we agree. We want to, you can't do enhanced oil recovery everywhere in Wyoming, but we want to make sure we're not doing CO2 storage at the expense of enhanced oil recovery. So we agree. We think it's a very interesting and important concept. We're happy to help.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, does the School of Energy Resource do any kind of partnerships with the law school? It seems like your school is very dedicated to supporting Wyoming's industry. And I don't know that, the law school has years ago had set up a clinic, and they were supposed to have law students, assist with the Attorney General's office in defending Wyoming's position in all these federal natural resource cases. And I don't know where the status of that program is, but it seems like there might be a nexus there. And I just was curious if there is an opportunity for partnership.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, we do have some partnerships with the law school. So our most important connection is one of the things the School of Energy Resources does is we hire faculty that have expertise important to Wyoming, but they don't sit with us. They sit in home departments. And so Professor Tara Rigetti, she's SCR professor of law. And so her tenure track is in the law school, and she is truly a world-class expert on energy law and especially pore space ownership. And she's at the law school. The other thing we have is the 3+3 program, which we launched last year, where students can come to the School of Energy Resources, 3 years of undergrad, then go straight to law school and have 3 years of law school and get both degrees. So that we're training and drawing in students that have energy interests to go to law school and making it easier and less costly for them. And we think that's important for Wyoming to have attorneys being graduated who are really interested in the energy sector. So, and then we have some research projects as well. Most of those are led by Professor Rigetti. So we do have some collaboration, but we're not involved in the clinics. We'd be happy to try to help with those if there is a role for us in that. So.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Oh, before we go to you, Randall, I'm gonna let Senator Jones jump in because I think it'll tie in with what you're gonna say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis, I am pleased, although it's not my news to tell, I am pleased to tell you that the AG clinic is back up. They will start again next fall, and I believe they have 6 students registered. We have also been encouraging the law school to put together what we call a legal center, because it can't be called a clinic, where you could also have students that actually get to participate on natural resource cases. And we haven't got there yet. And I think, again, the law school has been quite a topic of conversation, somewhat related to the earlier subject I brought up about the overall impression of the university. I'll let that go at that.
Okay, thank you. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering if you have a time frame for the Sweetwater project.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, so the Sweetwater project is a 3-year project, but first we have to negotiate the contract with the feds. So that'll take a matter of months. So maybe 3.5 years till completion, and then we're off and running.
Yeah, thank you. You Southwest folks, stay on top of this. It's a big deal down in your country. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief privilege in that the School of Energy Resources does announce the meetings for the Energy Resource Council. They're quarterly. And I know some of the people on the committee have attended those. If you can make those, it gives you a chance to have these questions answered and in as much detail as you want. And I would actually tell the committee, if you can attend, please do so. It helps SER. It helps those who are attending and you get some very detailed information.
Yeah, that's follow up. Don't be afraid to attend any of this. I try to attend all of them. I don't build a state for it. I just go and try to understand it. Not only this but with my co-op job too. All things energy. I'm trying to be at the table. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I just could say one thing. Also, I would welcome anyone on the committee and anyone in the legislature. Come visit us. We're happy to provide a tour in more detail. So Representative Lawley's taken us up on that offer, but it extends to all of you anytime. And we're always happy to talk about any of these topics in more detail. So please let us know if you're interested in joining us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Transition, Mr. Luthi, Ms. Hutchinson. Who wants to start us off here?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just give a brief introduction. Again, we've talked about a lot of different pieces working in Wyoming, and hopefully all these different organizations are working in a coordinated effort. The WEA is a legislative creation that is, focused on helping us focus on Wyoming energy, and that's another part of this overall energy equation as we look at for the state of Wyoming. I'm pleased to introduce, although all of you probably know her, our newly elected chairwoman, Wendy Hutchinson of the Wyoming Energy Authority. And we're just going to give you a little primer on what WEA does and maybe more importantly, what we don't do. So thank you.
Ms. Hutchinson, tell us about this.
Good morning. We'll start with the next slide, please, but I will take a moment to introduce myself. I am a bison and cattle rancher in Campbell County. I would say many of you may have encountered me when I was senior vice president for the Millennium Bulk Terminal, which was the coal export project we had going on in Longview, Washington, that had an ultimate goal of moving 48 million tons of PRB coal through that port to markets in Japan and Korea. Unfortunately, to no avail. Thank you, state of Washington. But anyway, but prior to that, I did mostly regulatory work for the PRB mines. I was regulatory affairs manager for Thunder Basin Coal Company for more years than I should state, although I did have a tour duty as a production superintendent and through mine planning in the business departments while I was with that company. And I am a civil engineer by training from The Ohio State University, both master's and bachelor's degrees in engineering. So going through the list of our current board of directors, the vice chair is Wanda Burgett. She is a principal with Accord Resources. She's also a former manager with Peabody. Mark Steggy, our secretary treasurer, is vice president with Black Hills Energy. Paul Ulrich is a vice president with Jonah Energy. Ken Miller is the retired CEO of Millennium Bulk Terminal, who has a special interest in electricity generation and markets. Donna Lawrence is the tax manager for Denbury Inc. And Kara Choquette is a director for the Transwest Express and Power Company of Wyoming. And then by now, you know all our ex officio members. Most of them have been before you here in the last few days. So. I do want to note, we do have a new executive director, Rob Krieger, will be starting on Monday. He came from the governor's office, so I assume many of you know Rob. We went through a nationwide search, had plenty of very well educated candidates. But for the time and the needs of where we see the energy authorities direction moving forward, we thought Rob was the best man for the job. So next slide, please. Also, WA staff, Anya Richmond is program director. She has been handling a lot of the work on the hydrogen hub concept, which Randall will talk about a little later. Marcio Pez Barreto is director of industrial development. He's been mostly focused on nuclear at this moment. We do have, thank you very much, for a new position we are getting out there that will be focused on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We do have the job description drafted at this point, and that activity will be moving forward post haste. Jamie Blasmo is our accounting manager, and Patrick Mullen handles our state energy program.
Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, Randall Lukey. I'm currently actually very pleased and honored to be this thing. You'd think I would have that down by now. Randall Lukey, who is at the moment is the interim director of the Wyoming Energy Authority. But I will point out the chairwoman Hutchinson has indicated that she's going to fire me at 5 p.m. today. So yep, out the door. But with that, I'm just going to touch on some of the programs that WEA is working on. Many of you know WA from their Energy Summit. It's an annual event, generally takes place normally in Cheyenne, but it brings to light, it actually brings companies and private individuals in to talk about energy projects they are doing in Wyoming or would like to do in Wyoming. The WE also enforces the overall energy policy of the state, which is frankly is the governor's energy policy. We have an all the above energy policy. If you would like to go to the WE website, you can see where that has been fleshed out. We continue to change that, update it, and make sure that it's a policy that accurately reflects what's going on today. WEA is also managing the governor's energy matching funds. And this is also thanks to you, members of the legislature, that provided a reason, actually a very nice sized pot of money. 1 year was 100 million with some footnotes going elsewhere. Another 50 was put in this year. But the idea is this is money that we can use to help match those federal monies that come out, just like the project that was announced this week, and where we can work with private and our federal people, and we will provide a chunk of funding to help get these projects done. The state energy program is a program that is entirely federally funded by the Department of Energy. It does have currently $444,000 in this year. Here's some of the things they do. They do energy efficiency studies. They work with schools. They actually have grants awarded to schools and other entities to increase their energy efficiency. But the overall purpose is to implement the overall state energy strategy. And I think we're just now beginning to scratch the surface of how we can use that position, but it's there and it's available to us. One of the next things you're going to see out is the nuclear framework, which has been put together by Marcio. And it's a living document where it just says, this is where we are today with the nuclear energy, where we hope to go, and things we need to talk about as we move forward. So that, again, it gives you an idea of some of the programs that have been ongoing. If you go to the next slide, that'll give you an idea of the projects that they've been that have been focused in on. Most of these projects are funded through several years ago. The legislature set aside money, $12 million for a flameless pressurized oxy-combustion unit. And if that did not occur, that's a type of carbon capture. But if that project wasn't funded by DOE, which it was not, then that money became available for other projects. And those projects are usually coordinated through the Energy Resources Council, but the money, once again, is managed by the Wyoming Energy Authority. We have projects dealing with 8 Rivers, which is a carbon capture and hydrogen project as they decide different ways to develop hydrogen. We have 2 with Black Hills. One deals with hydrogen blending, and my non-scientific summary would be they're seeing how much hydrogen you can blend with natural gas and put in a turbine without wrecking the whole place. And just again, in non-scientific terms. They also have announced recently the Bright Loop project, which is where they actually are using testing out a method to actually use coal and go to hydrogen, which again, if you're looking at uses of coal, something we would really like to know the information on. Williams Pipelines also is doing a access study where they're studying what it would take to actually be able to move hydrogen out of central and southeastern Wyoming, actually Wamsutter, that area, and what the type of pipeline, assessing if there is energy development projects, how much water that may take. And again, those are studies that, again, should provide all useful information. The most important one, I'm embarrassed to tell you, or at least the one that seems furthest along at the moment, is the hydrogen hub. Several months ago, the 4 states, not even Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico decided that they would make an application for a federal grant for a hydrogen hub. The overall DOE grant was $7 billion. The 4 states cooperated. They actually formed a group that eventually decided on 8 projects within those 4 states and submitted that application the end of April. If that application is approved, that would be $1.25 billion be spread among those projects within the state. We won't know until August if we're close, but I'll tell you, that's been an interesting project. 4 states could not be more different politically, could not be more different in energy sources, could not be more different in overall philosophy. But we found out that everyone can work together if we really try. So you're going to have a combination of what most people call green hydrogen. Wyoming is focused in on blue hydrogen, which is developing hydrogen from natural gas. So stay tuned for that one. The other projects we're dealing with, Tallgrass has a project, and they're studying the potential to sequester CO2 in the Denver Julesburg, Madison, or not Madison, but formations. But that would help them. They need more information as they move forward with their project that could sequester CO2 in Southeast Wyoming. We also work with SER, and we've mentioned the Maui project and the core critical materials project. And I mentioned the Williams project. So that's it, and gives you an overall of projects of what we're dealing on. So if you go to the next slide, plans, you're way ahead of me. Here's what, as we look forward and as Rob comes on board, certainly want to continue to update the energy strategy. We want to work closely with members of the legislature. You're really our main committee. And I'm not just saying that because I'm here in front of you today. You are the committee that we work the most with. We look forward to working with you and would like to work with you as we continue to update what our strategy should be. Continued with that, state agencies. We talked a little bit about the importance of coordination. I, of course, thinking we may have it down. We're actually making this work, but in reality, we can always make it better as we work through all the state agencies. WA is very small in terms of actual staff, but how do you be effective? And it's because we're able to use the state agencies, we're able to use the ex officio board members, the board members themselves. You know, we talk a lot about Wyoming and the importance of its natural resources, but I'll tell you what makes Wyoming clicker, it's people. And it's people that are willing to work together to actually see a unified vision and work towards it. And that's what one of the main goals of the WAA is, to help continue that moving forward. Would also like to continue to work with you. I told you we're a small, I said tiny agency. Let's start thinking about how do we grow? How should we grow? Should there be one new staff member a year for 2 or 3 years? We have a new lease, so we're going to be able to have a few more people in one office, which is very helpful. But let's talk about that. I do believe Wyoming Energy Authority should grow and they should have more people. We'll be releasing that CCUS job description soon. Maybe if I hurry, I can do it before I'm fired at 5, but that should be available pretty soon. So with that, again, our overall focus is making Wyoming Energy work. We have a strong support for our heritage resources. And we also look forward for those resources that we may not know about and those other resources that are on the cusp. With that, I'd give back to, although it looks like I'm going to be questioned by the co-chairman, which is always
Retirement.
a fear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for either one of you. So I understand that WA is moving their office location. And if you need to add people, does your new location give you enough physical space to do that?
Mr. Chairman, it does. We have about 4 empty offices, as I recall, 3 with the new person that we'll be hiring soon.
Go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has the idea been explored of maybe doing splitting the state into regions and having people placed across the state for the Energy Authority? I don't know how that would work with your group, but that might be an option to have like 4 regions. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that's one of the reasons we like working with the legislature, is to give us those kind of ideas. I just saw Chairwoman Hutchinson write it down, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And on that point, you know, obviously we created the Energy Authority just a few years ago from the Pipeline and Infrastructure Authority, and the intent, which has proved incredibly valuable, and I think we're achieving that intent, is to provide an excellent front door for the state when it comes to energy projects, and to coordinate energy projects statewide. So we're seeing that accomplished, and we're seeing it accomplished well. At the same time, I do feel like there are an awful lot of projects relative to the number of full-time employees that are in the Wyoming Energy Authority. And anytime you see an org chart where you've got, what do we have about? We've got about 10 kind of directors, boards of directors, volunteer positions. And looks like we've currently got 5 employees. So there's 2 board members per employee. A lot of times that's not the ratio you're looking for. Yeah, when you've got 2 bosses per person on average, right? Has there been internal conversation to figure out what the right size is at this point, based on the number of contacts, number of projects, intended growth? And I realize there's always a reticence to come and ask for more positions, but it's regrettable when the driving force for decision-making in the state is not what is the right solution, but what could make it through JAC. So I think this committee, and I certainly would like to understand what the right answer is, as opposed to what we can politically make happen as a first approximation. What's the correct aspiration based on the needs of the state to fully provide a productive energy authority so that you can work at your maximum capacity and it's valuable for the state to do that. And then see how the political chips play out. So is that something that's being contemplated internally? Is what's the right size this year, next year? And you kind of hinted at, should we grow 1, 2, or 3 a year? That sounds like the thing we should say to JAC because they would accept that. What's the right answer if we weren't so worried about just getting the FTEs approved and we're worried about doing the business of the state of Wyoming?
Either one of you have the right answer?
Then you can do damage control. So. Well, I'll say obviously with a new executive director and with a new chair, the Energy Authority is in a transition period as we speak. One of the things the board has discussed is that we really do need to kind of do a sit down, look back at what we've accomplished in the last 3 years, but really what's our vision of what we want to accomplish in the coming years. And as we do that, I believe this discussion will be part of that. What then do we need as staff people, as you will, to accomplish this vision? So with that, I'll let
Mr. Luthi?
Randall.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Raffas, that's hard. I believe the chairwoman's hit it directly on the head. The infancy is somewhat over maybe for WEA. Now we're crawling maybe the toddler stage, and we do need to figure out where we want to go. Some members of the legislature, I think when they envisioned this, that it would be like a Department of Energy, but we were not going to put a whole new Department of Energy in because we just, Wyoming's very conservative about growth of state government. So you start small. Many people view this as a somewhat of a one-stop shop where you just go get information. I believe just because of staff constraints, in many degrees, that's what it has been. My own personal view is that's not where we should be stopping. We need to get the right expertise. We do talk about numbers, but the real key, once again, is the right expertise. Let's identify particular areas we want to focus in on. I think we've already started that. We have things, the board is starting to look at an area, heritage resources. Those are our traditional foundational resources, frontier resources, markets. Those kind of things we need to look at as we move forward. And I welcome that discussion with members of the committee. And we'll be happy to do that or, work with the WEA in whatever role I have, from now on. But again, it's one of those things where you're right on the cusp. You see the promise, you see the possibility, and you just want to make sure you do it right. And in this case, I think more heads thinking about this is a good idea. I seldom say that about the legislature, but this time I will.
Follow up here, and then we'll go down to Representative Heiner.
Yeah, quick follow-up, and I appreciate that, and I do think it will require some thoughtfulness. The concern I have with perhaps being too slow and thoughtful about it is that as I see it, based on kind of the structure we've set up, every energy related project that begins in this state or develops in this state, every single one of them, whether it's from a startup to a large scale facility, existing operation, every one of them is going to coordinate through the Energy Authority. And if we are too slow, then we end up creating a pinch point where everyone waits for the Energy Authority's bandwidth, their time to proceed with a project. And I know you don't want that. You want to be able to serve all of those needs, and you never will want to be holding anything back. You want to be facilitating. So while we should be thoughtful and prudent about who we add, get the right people, I think we need to recognize that we don't want bureaucracy. We don't want the process to stand in the way of progress. And we see that a lot. We're used to seeing that in government, and what I know the Education Authority is designed to facilitate. So I'm worried that we won't be serving that role if we don't have sufficient personnel. But thank you for that consideration.
Want to respond or?
Just would add my amen to that. You may have noticed I have Arctic blonde hair. I don't have time to wait for a lot of projects to occur. So I too want to see them move forward along. But once again, as we think about this strategically, we also have the business council. You know, there is an asset there. Their various programs. You know, as you look at it somewhat organically, SCR helps start the process. That's where we get some of the research. That's where we get close to commercialization. Then we have WEA that can also bring in those ideas with existing and ongoing energy resources. We have the business council then, if there are resources that are necessary. And once again, thanks to you, add the governor's energy matching funds. A lot of the pieces are there. Let's think about how to use them quickly and efficiently. I couldn't agree more.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairwoman Hutchinson and Mr. Luthi, this committee that I've been associated with for a number of years now, we've tried to extend a lifeline to our coal resources as much as possible. And even the legislature as a whole, we've done whatever we could to extend that life because it's very valuable for our state and the economy that we have. But with the recent announced IRP from one of our largest utilities, it's obvious that we're not succeeding very well. The demise of coal fired power plants it appears imminent. And so we need to look at other resources, other avenues for our coal. And on your projects, you don't include coal to ammonia, which we've heard a little bit about recently. What could the Energy Authority do to assist with that as another project, a possible lifeline to our coal mines through coal to ammonia? What resources could you provide for that?
Either one?
I'm getting the eye. I think I'm going to have to answer that one. Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, that projects like coal to ammonia, coal to hydrogen, all have promise. And I really do believe that. As you look at the various projects, at the various opportunities, some I've mentioned, have you got a research component to that SCR could help with? If you have a funding question, do you have private funding, venture capital? Do you have something to actually get it started so that Wyoming isn't the sole proprietor of the funds? We don't have the money to do that, but we can assist. Are the feed studies done? Those are the things that I'm hoping we can help with. And again, some of it, frankly, goes back to the companies themselves. In the time that I've been with the governor's office, I would say on average, every 2, maybe 3 weeks, a company will call me and say, I can save your coal industry. I can save your overall energy industry. And I'll tell you, when you start following up on those, there's generally no capital behind it, often no research behind it, and often no business plan other than to get money from the state of Wyoming. We're glad to help. We just need to make sure, we're in the position where we can hopefully, fund as many successful businesses as we can.
Senator Cooper. We got you out there in outer darkness, friend. Go ahead.
Pardon?
We got you kind of in outer darkness out there. Jump right into the mix.
For interim director Luthi here, in your short future career with WEA and in your handover notes to Director Greger, could you put together an ask list for the next meeting we have and really have a good solid idea of what we're going to need for personnel as we grow? Because I think, in my opinion, we're, as you said, we're right on the cusp of being there. We need to move quickly and really have a good business plan, if you will, of how we're going to grow it and what kind of personnel we're actually needing, so we know what to go ask for. In other words, I'd like to see the WEA come to us with a really strong ask as far as where your direction is.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, yes.
It's a good approach. Make it strong. Those folks on appropriations aren't friendly, so, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Luthi, again, I think you kind of began to address in some of your comments, my question of, because about strategic focus that is so important for our state. And I like the way you put together the different parts of the team, because the legislature itself is, I've learned in only my first session, 4 months in, is not well suited for strategic focus. And that's not a bad thing. We are a partner in strategic focus. I want to say that, but I do appreciate the role you're lining out and, you know, again, if you could speak to a little bit this idea of how important it is that we have some place where we're generating the discussions on strategic focus in the energy sector. So I do believe it's highly important. And again, I would just say others at the table might not agree with me, but I'm not, again, the legislature is not as well suited for that. We play a partnership role with you in that. So could you talk about that? And then before I give the mic up, I'm sorry to see you go. And if we need to have a small little gathering to celebrate the moment, you let us know.
Gathering will be back in the corner there to wish you well.
Cake bites in the back.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lawley, I couldn't agree. Again, I don't want to just sound like, yes, man to the legislature. But yes, that's absolutely right. And that's what I think the role of organizations like WAA is. We need to do that strategic thinking. And I think we're to the point where we can do it now. Frankly, former director Glenn Murrell, we gave him a huge amount of tasks to accomplish. I doubt he even had time to think about what he would have for breakfast, let alone some really helpful long-term strategic, because we, including the legislature, we're continuing to give him more things to talk about and more things to do. The legislature continues to do that. That's fine. Just work with us of what doesn't get done when we have something new. The most recent that we're excited about is the legislature added, refineries as a specific thing that WEA could look at. And also the idea of bonding. So as we move forward, there's two good ones right there where I think we can work together a strategic plan of where we want to be.
Okay, works. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I have one. Both of you actually. Ms. Hutchinson takes you back to your previous life up in Washington State. And that kind of fell apart. We were still working on it. I go back a few years now because a little group of us put together a Zoom meeting with our governor and the governor-elect just to the southwest of us. And we said, what can we do to work together? We're talking about working on hydrogen hubs. Can we work together on shipping coal out of this state? You're sitting in town now with the rail spur down to the south of us. Rock Springs, we've got a rail service. Gillette, we've got rail service. At that time, Utah was very interested. Can we talk to them again? Can we somehow get this up? I just cannot understand the concept of why we can't take care of our own commerce and ship out of a port. Reflect on Longview was friendly to you. The state was not. Is there any potential that we could hook up with Utah on more than just hydrogen?
I think that's a fantastic concept. I will say that the parent company that I worked for with Millennium looked at 28 different sites to find where is the best site to put a coal export terminal, and landed on the spot in Longview, Washington, where there was a former aluminum smelter there. So it was a brownfield site that had been in production and had coal on it since 1941. Had an existing rail line to it, had existing access to the navigation channel on the Columbia River. That site has not, it continues with the cleanup of the smelter itself, but that site is still unencumbered by any other commerce, I would say at this point. And I do think it's well worth having those conversations with the other states. I do think there's definite difficulty there. But it certainly deserves more attention, I think.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any work you can do. Krieger's a good hire, young, enthusiastic, brilliant. Make sure he keeps all that going. Randall, thanks for stepping in and keeping the ball rolling, everybody.
Again, it's been an honor. He is all that I'm not. Yes.
Well, All right, yeah, I was thinking it's probably time for a health break and we want
We
to
do
stay
have
on.
one more slide. I don't know if you
Oh,
want
okay,
to finish
go
with
ahead.
us first. So Representative Burkhart wanted to make sure that we addressed the coal marketing fund. And I will tell you, I think this is one of the better investments that the legislature has made for the coal industry. And specifically, the coal marketing fund was appropriated directly to the originally WIA, but now the WEA, for help to preserve Wyoming coal markets. We have utilized those funds with a group called the Energy Policy Network. That was a group that was originally started by Kelly Mader from Campbell County originally. Randy Eminger took that over after Kelly passed away and has been working tirelessly on that project. And we have another change now. Randy is intending to retire at the end of this year. The board of the Energy Policy Network has elected Mike Nassy, who's an attorney with Jackson Walker, to be the new executive director of that entity. They have been working, I would put their work in certain buckets, if you will. The way the policy network started out really was taking, it's really, their job is really to be the advocate and representative for Wyoming PRB coal in states where our coal is utilized. So the early work that they were doing was sort of a power plant by power plant fight to keep individual power plants open. And the way that they conducted that was intervening into IRPs in those states and building a coalition of other interested parties, consumers of the electricity, that sort of thing, to investigate and look at and give another perspective on that from the consumer standpoint for the benefit of PRB coal. I would say just in the last 3 years, there have been 3 plants whose life was extended with the help of the Energy Policy Network. And that group has, and that has, added another 20 million tons of coal into our world that would have otherwise been stopped. Since 2015, in total, as a rough estimate, probably about 80 million tons of coal from Wyoming has been saved, I would say, and still in usage due to the work of EPN. So with that, and of course that translate into taxes. So a rough estimate just for the last 3 years of work, I would say has brought about $64 million in taxes from the coal that was able to be kept in the market. Another piece of work that they do is, and where the group is transitioning now more, is this issue on grid reliability and sustainability, if you will, in the markets that we serve and in the regional transmission organizations. So a lot of the work that's being done is education to PSC commissioners in those states on reliability and using, for example, Winter Storm Uri in Texas that killed 57 Texas residents due to a lack of electricity. I know you're all aware of that. But Jackson Walker did a very detailed study on what exactly happened throughout that storm and what was happening in ERCOT when that was going on, and then some of the work that's been done in the Texas legislature to address that. Yesterday also was mentioned Winter Storm Elliott that happened over New Year's Eve in the Midwest, but really did hit the southeast part of the United States. That was a storm that when it came in, wind came in strong. As the front came in, life was great, but then on Christmas Eve, the wind stopped blowing and there was a market increase in, electricity demand that evening. And that increase in electricity demand, that gap was filled with gas and with coal. 50 megawatts of coal, or gigawatts, I'm sorry, of coal powered up across the United States to help avert a disaster there on Christmas Eve. And it's those kinds of things that are coming more and more to the attention of the regional transmission office organizations. And so part of what EPN is doing is in that space on education about the need for dispatchable baseload power, which coal supplies. The other thing that's important to remember is that coal is a dispatchable resource that keeps their fuel on site. So coal stockpiles are on site, keeping, 30 to 60 days worth of fuel on site. Gas plants not all gas plants have the option to burn fuel oil when the gas can't get to them in the pipeline. So these are important things that this organization is doing for the state of Wyoming. But they also, did, as an example, they spearheaded a letter to the Southwest Power Pool on a desire for incentives to promote reliability and resilience. And that was signed by 7 governors, including the governor of Wyoming, but also Arkansas, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. So those are the types of advocacy that this group is doing for us. They also have for the last several years brought different elected officials from our coal consuming states to Gillette, Wyoming to tour the Dry Fork Power Plant, to see a coal mine, to educate them so that they understand what that really looks like, what a beautiful and new coal-fired power plant looks like, and what a beautiful coal mine looks like. And over the years, I think there's been 83 different elected officials and others who have come to Gillette to see that. And I will just say from a personal standpoint, we also brought legislators from Washington State to Gillette for that same tour. And that really did turn the public opinion tide for us on that project locally. So that's an important role that is played. And also they do some promotion of carbon capture, utilization of storage as well when the opportunity presents itself. But mostly they aren't a lobbying group by any means, but they are there for education. They answer really basic questions from legislators in other states, like can the coal piles freeze? Things like that, as well as the volume of coal that is supplied. But I do think we are seeing a shift, much more discussion in those RTOs about the reliability and the need for baseload power, of which coal provides an important part of that. There was a recent report put out by McCloskey on the extension of coal-fired power plants and remaining life. And of that, in that report, some 16 million tons of that came from Wyoming PRB just in 2022 to the particular plants that were some of those particular plants that are being extended. Obviously, we have continued challenges, as mentioned here, with these new rules from EPA. There's no less than 6 rules from EPA that are targeted at the existing coal fleet that the United States depends on at all times and not just times of trouble. And so I think there's a continued education in those areas that this group is uniquely positioned to be able to educate around.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairwoman, this coal marketing fund, it was set up to preserve coal for the entire state or just the PRB? And you've talked a lot about what is brought for the PRB, but what has it done for this Southwest Wyoming coal market?
I don't know what the answer to that is.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, my memory tells me that the original legislation was targeted at PRB. Now, frankly, we have not hesitated if we could use it to direct it otherwise, but I believe the original legislation was PRB.
Thank you. We would like a little attention over on this side too, so thank you. All right. Very good. All right, anything else? Let's take a break. Let's go to Mr. Connolly. Did you have something? Oh, public comment. Do you have one? Go ahead. You step up here and lay out. I'm pushing for that 11 a.m. deadline, so okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, committee. Good morning, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have about 4 or 5 things. I'll try to be very brief for you. I know your schedule is tight. Number one, please look at legislation that helps create a workforce. You contribute to the Hathaway, incentivize the companies to take the Hathaway kids and put them into a workforce and on-the-job training. We are at a critical state for workforce in this state. You're sitting in a facility that we're working with TerraPower right now to double the size and create a workforce out of here. Incentivize the companies to do that. You have that authority to do that. Match the money that you put out as a legislature and get them to match it. And then that gives them an employee for a time span. So that would be my first lift on this for what I would like you to look at. Secondly, coal, does it help? What's going on with it? And natural gas, you are at the home of the only coal-fired power plant that fires off of natural gas. They use heating oil and all the rest. When we had to basically go to war to keep Naughton number 3 out here that you pass out here, they didn't have to convert it to natural gas, just the burners inside. You could turn it into a kitchen stove and burn natural gas. You are sitting at the home. Last night, I never talked about this, of the Opal Turn Hub. The Opal Turn Hub, as Mr. Obermueller told you, is one of the direct reasons you just put $1.4 billion away. That rise in there shouldn't have probably happened if you listen to the logic coming out of most of the companies that you're dealing with. Rise in natural gas, that's all you heard. Well, that rise got you the money, but it also kept those coal plants burning in this location. And a direct result for Sweetwater County was now that number 1 and number 2 units will be switching to natural gas. 4 years ago in the 29 IRP, they were absolutely refusing, that's Rocky Mountain Power, to discuss natural gas as an option. Why is it an option today? It's money, and you and I both know it. Okay, you are the home right now of the Western Hemisphere's largest turn hub. Turn hubs have been spoken in here. Turn hubs push gas. They can push any type of gas. So when the questions were asked, I believe, on how do you get some of these new technologies in, sure, you're going to need interties. There's 24 pipelines come out of Opal. They feed the systems of the Western United States. Your top competitor is the Henry's Hub in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Those are your competitors. We are a world leader because Exxon chose to come here a long time ago and other companies came here. Corporate tax plays into that. Don't forget that, because it's a fine line in between. But we need to push coal for what it is. 19 commercial products come out of it. Natural gas has the same thing. And don't forget that dinosaurs make good fertilizer. That's called humate. That's one of the byproducts you're talking about. And helium is just another one out of the natural gas, but so is the products you can make from coal. I said last night to you, coal's not going anywhere. It's not. It's actually got gold in it, and there's been a few legislators want to know how to get it out of it. But most of the products do around here. But those rare earth minerals are worth a lot of money. If you don't think so, why are you spending billions to go to the moon to get them? They are in the constituents you're talking about. Wyoming is famous for what we have in the ground. We need to get an educated workforce. The sheet the ladies put up here before, you have that massive sheet in front of you because of the opportunities those companies seek. And they know they can come to Wyoming and make money. That margin is thin. Please remember that in the legislation you're looking at. We need to retain the minerals in Wyoming and process it in Wyoming so we collect the taxes off of it. And the taxes part comes from a county commissioner. And I would take any questions on that. But don't forget where Opal is. Opal's here in this county. And by the way, it's only been pushing 60%. When you went up in the money you got, it went to 70%. So those are the percentages of the kind of money that's capable of coming out of all the mineral industries out of here. And you get to benefit from spending that money. And money usually dictates business, but it does dictate how you do business too with the rest of us in the state. And I'd be more than happy if you'd give us counties more money, but I would take questions.
Okay, questions for our commissioner? You can tell he tracks it well. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. All right. Is there any comments online? Okay, let's take about 15 minutes, 5-2, and then we're going to come back, hit those next 2 topics, and then load up on the bus. Thank you.
I will. Let's do this. We'll let Jennifer talk. I'll talk to Jennifer. I'm not going to say anything on this permitting thing. I will bring a draft bill for the next
Okay.
That saves us some
Okay, let's go back to work. Shoot for 11 a.m. departure. Permitting, who's our speaker on that? There we go. Very good. Welcome back. You had to stay and work. Okay. Glad to have you. Okay, just as a reminder, name and let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Zigmund. I'm the Water Quality Division Administrator for the DEQ. I'm here for Director Parfit today. He had to get back to Cheyenne for a meeting this afternoon. So he gave me his talking points and asked me to cover first some of the things that we're doing within DEQ for permitting efficiencies, and then talk about a specific project that has been fairly innovative in terms of streamlining and speeding up the permitting process while still making sure we're meeting environmental protection requirements. But first, to go over some things that DEQ does regularly to look for permitting efficiencies. First, we have ample dashboards that we use to track the work that we do. We look at average number of permits and the timelines to issue those permits. And then we look for trends. Are we seeing programs, we're seeing increasing number of permits or increasing times to issue those permits? We evaluate the target timelines that we have by rule or statute to issue the permits versus the actual time. I know for most of our programs, we do issue the actual permits below the statutory required review times. We also look at staffing trends and our vacancies. I know this is an issue that the legislature is familiar with in terms of challenges with hiring and retaining staff. We do look closely at our staff retention rates. We analyze that on a regular basis, and we do comparison with other states as well as with EPA. We do see trends, and I think as the legislature is familiar with, we have challenges with certain types of positions. Engineers can be very difficult to hire at this time. We are seeing most vacancies within our air quality division at this time. And so we're looking for other ways that we can retain the staff that we have. We are very excited to have signed a recent contract with the University of Wyoming for a new internship program. I can speak for water quality. I think within 2 days of that contract being signed, I had 3 interns interested in some of our internship opportunities, and they're very well qualified. So we're looking forward to growing that program. The compensation packages that have been approved by the legislature have been very well appreciated by staff, and that will play into staff retention. We do look closely at the staff positions that we have, and where we need reclassifications, we have focused discussions with A&I about those reclassifications to make sure that our staff positions are appropriately classified for the duties that staff do. And then finally, if you're not aware, it is the 50th anniversary of the DEQ this year. So we are doing promotional activities all year long. We do have an excellent story map available on our website. If you've not taken a look at that, encourage you to take a look. It is an opportunity for us to promote the good work that our staff do, and along with individual staff members who go above and beyond in their daily duties. All of the DEQ divisions and programs have gone through process improvement programs, often referred to as the lean management methodology. And this is an opportunity to sit down with a facilitator and in great detail map out what we do, not just conceptually, but on a day-to-day basis. How do we get a permit application, all the steps to getting that permit issued and out the door. It's a very interesting process, and it really shines a light on where we have inefficiencies. For example, there may be steps where we take 5 actions when 1 would suffice. And so we've been able to narrow down our permitting windows by looking for those inefficiencies and making procedural changes where we can. One of the, and I'll speak for water quality here, one of the biggest things that came out of our lean management process was improving our electronic document and permitting management systems. And I think this particularly applies to water quality, but for all of our divisions, having those electronic permitting mechanisms and reporting mechanisms is a huge part of gaining efficiencies in what we do. It supports digital filing and reporting, and provides applicants with an electronic permitting portal where they can drop off their applications, speeds up review time. They can access their portfolio within that system, so they don't have to request information from us. They can track its progress
We can share information, have electronic reminders for people to renew permits or to notify people of any changes that may be occurring within our programs. So water quality, we're very pleased to be working toward a consolidated system for all of our major permitting programs. We just got the first permit, which is our WIPD's Point Source Discharge Permitting Program online within the past couple months. And then we expect to have our other permitting programs on that system within the next 2 years. So we'll have one electronic portal system for everybody to apply for our major permits. So speaking for water quality, again, that's going to be a huge improvement and a huge efficiency gains for our permitting programs. We also use permitting mechanisms called permits by rule or general permits where we can. This allows us to, for very fairly simple activities, a permit by rule just establishes in rural conditions that people have to meet in order to be authorized to do that activity. General permits are the next step up where we have an umbrella type permit with conditions established. And if somebody applies for coverage under that general permit, all we have to do is issue a letter of authorization that says they meet the conditions of that general permit and they have coverage. With all of the large projects going on in the state, it's also very important for us to have an agency coordination. And this has been very helpful when projects come in early, and we really want that early communication to sit down and meet with all of our divisions to go over high-level permitting requirements. This allows the company to plan better in terms of timelines, which permits are going to take the longest time versus which activities can be permitted by rule or covered under general permits, which is a much shorter permitting timeframe. So that coordination has been working well, and it's going to be even more important as we move forward with these new projects coming in the door to have that early and often communication with the companies. Finally, the agency and all of our divisions participate in national associations such as ECOS, the Environmental Council Environmental Council of States, Association of Clean Water Administrators, Association of Safe Drinking Water Administrators. These are really important groups to weigh in on national policy, national rules that are being made, and most importantly, to develop solutions that work for all states, meaning the more that we can develop solutions, technology that aren't custom made for each state, but that, you know, if Arizona develops a tool that works well for us, we can just take that technology, modify it and use it in Wyoming. So it's very important for those national associations, for all the states to be talking to each other, to look for the common ground and solutions that can work for everybody and save time and money for each state, not having to recreate solutions. Director Parfit's terminology for that is rip off and deploy. So if you hear that from him, it's just a solution that anybody can pick up and run with right away. So those are some of the standard activities that DEQ does. Director Parfit asked me to talk specifically about an air quality permit that we issued recently for the Wyoming Innovation Center in Campbell County. This is for an industrial park facility. And what was unique about this is rather than writing a permit, an air quality permit for each part of that industrial park, what our air quality division did is they issued kind of an umbrella permit similar to the general permits that we just talked about. But that umbrella permit is written to the thresholds that are still protective of air quality and would meet all requirements of that program. So the umbrella permit was established, and as individual parts of that industrial park come online, again, they just apply for coverage under that umbrella permit. Air quality staff will review that for compliance with the permit for the facility. And this saves a significant amount of time by only having to confirm compliance with the umbrella permit, but not having to issue a new permit for each part of that industrial park. So it speeds up the permitting significantly. It provides regulatory certainty to the components that are applying for coverage under that permit. It allows us to verify compliance. And most importantly, we provide the same level of environmental protection while making a smoother process, a more efficient process for the applicants. So Mr. Chairman, that covers the points that Director Parfit asked me to talk to you about today. I would be happy to answer further questions.
Thank you. Just really quick, you said the 50th anniversary, DEQ?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
50th, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for all that DEQ helps us with along the way. A little concerned about those those open positions in air quality. Our neighbors in Canada are sharing the love with us today, all their wildfires. Okay, Mr. Conrad, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you, a couple of series of questions here. What is your AQD vacancy right now?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the air quality is still around 25% vacant.
Mr. Chairman,
Go
follow
ahead, follow.
LQD?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I don't have the vacancy numbers with me. I believe land quality is either fully staffed or close to being fully staffed. I don't think they're looking at a severe shortage.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
WQD?
Mr. Chairman, same for water quality in that we're within our normal range of vacancies. I believe we have 1 to 2 positions vacant right now, but that's it. And that's just due to normal rate of staff turnover.
Drilling down, aren't you? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess one of the questions for you is, one of the challenges that the industry has is the inability to really see the process of an AQD report, or more importantly, an application. When you review impact, it doesn't give you really an up-to-date value or perspective on where that permit lies, where it's at, and where it's going to go. A specific example is when we look at a Title V permit, the updating of a Title V permit is now in some industries taking over a year, and they still do not have that Title V. I would assume part of that may be, in fact, based on the AQD's 25% vacancy rate. But the challenge is the inability to get a timely report, or most importantly, a permit, where that's an NSR, et cetera. The industry is not just are not getting the reports in time. And the conclusion of that is a question or a comment: how well are we working with the BLM? Because there are a number of times where the WDEQ will provide instances of compliance or necessities for actions to be taken, but they are in direct conflict with the BLM's timing because it doesn't impact the BLM. So my question ultimately, before Representative Burkhart asks me what the question truly is there in fact a collaborative effort between the two agencies, BLM and the Wyoming DEQ, to communicate together when it comes to expectations as they relate to permits?
Go ahead. I'll let you finish your notes if you need to. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Conrad, I'll have to defer my response primarily to water quality in that the coordination with BLM is, I would agree, very important to efficient permitting. We are working through several MOUs with the BLM, particularly related to the Class 6 permitting that you heard quite a bit about yesterday. So it is important to make sure that we are working hand in hand with them when our permitting decisions are contingent upon decisions they may have to make about federal lands. I can't speak for air quality. I'm pretty sure that they're working toward the same level of coordination. I do know at an agency level, their coordination is occurring between Director Parfit and the BLM headquarters office. I'd be happy to provide more information to you after I get back to the office.
Further questions for the DEQ? Further questions? All right. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Zingman and I were going to present a proposal conceptually on a process to speed up the permitting and to do some things, but in the interest of time, we've decided not to. I'll work with the department and we'll probably just bring a draft bill for the next session.
Okay.
So like all things, it takes people and money more than anything else. But I've talked to industry, I've talked to the governor's office, and there is positive comments all around on the process. So I'll work with the department and we'll do that in the interest of time. I couldn't see just presenting a concept and then turn around and present something at the next session, next meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone have a follow-up to that? You do? Go ahead.
Just on a similar line and similar to our prior discussions, you do mention that you have some vacancies, but it mostly staffed across DEQ, and that some reclassifications were taking place to help facilitate that. I'm interested in understanding, and maybe not today, but maybe at future meetings, really where we are in DEQ relative to appropriate market, and understanding challenges to retention of our employees, because it's not enough to just have bodies and seats. Experience matters, and you want the best folks working to get these jobs done. So if we can learn a little bit more about that at the next meeting, understand better, as well as understand any proposals again, aspirations on what is the most effective workforce for achieving the objectives of DEQ, not just where are we at now, and also recognizing that that has changed over the years. So while all of this testimony will go to the Appropriations Committee, it will go there quickly, and you'll be in and out, and this is the home committee of DEQ, and I think it's really important for us to understand and advocate for the interests of facilitating the mission of DEQ. So I would love to know more where we're at, what we need. And this ties into obviously permitting timeline, which I haven't been hearing any significant complaints in any sector. So I know it's not like a few years ago when, we were woefully understaffed in land quality. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago. But I'd like to understand where we can improve.
So Senator, you're asking for a report next meeting? Is that the way I understand?
Not a formal report.
But an
Yeah,
overview? Okay.
absolutely.
So absent objection from the committee, staff, if you could kind of make a note of that, and our friends from DEQ, if you'd be back with that report next time around. I think we're in Rock Springs next time. Okay.
Happy to.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You had to stay and do the duty. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. Nuclear industry, uranium supplies. Randall Luthi, you're back up. Jen Thompson from Governor's Office. Travis Detai. You're going to tell us where we're going to find uranium.
A little bit anywhere we do.
Yeah. Who opens for us? Who opens for us?
Mr. Chairman, I will.
Sid, go ahead. I'll point it to you eventually.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Jennifer Thompson, and I am the governor's major projects manager. Within that description, the TerraPower project and nuclear fits within that portfolio. With me today too is Randall Luthi, who you all have heard from earlier, the Chief Energy Policy Advisor for the Governor, to answer additional questions should they arise. Next slide. So I'm going to start at a high level on nuclear and why nuclear is in Wyoming. The federal government has, over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, put a lot of money into the nuclear industry. They had an advanced reactor demonstration program that they had some money put in May 2020. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 had additional billions of dollars, and the Inflation Reduction Act also included programs within it. And all of those programs have resulted in a resurgence in the nuclear industry and an interest across the country in seeing more nuclear coming online. Recently, the Department of Energy put out a study called the DOE Pathways to Commercial Liftoff. There are a number of different reports within that, including one on nuclear. This chart I've included, there's also a blow up of it in the back of the room for people to look at. Really identifies the importance of nuclear in our grid reliability. They have a number of studies looking at all of the different potential energy sources that feed our grid. And that column of firm, what is meant by firm is really reliable and dispatchable. So that's key. Those dark green ones are key. Those are the ones that allow us to make sure that we have lights turning on 24/7. And so when you look at that column, you'll see nuclear is there, renewables, but not just renewables, it's renewables with storage, and then natural gas with CCUS, coal with CCUS, natural gas and coal. And as the governor would say, if we were looking at sources and we really want to compare them, we need to compare the ones in the firm column that are the dark green and the cost of those when we're talking about what our future looks like. Next slide, please. So the WEA did discuss earlier that we have a governor's energy, all of the above energy strategy. Nuclear fits into that strategy. we're really excited. Terra Power in 2021 did a site selection and chose Kemmer for their project. Their project originally got some money out of the DOE Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program and then additional dollars that fed into that program through IJA. It's a 50-50 split. So Terra Power is putting in 50% and the federal government is putting in the other 50% for that project, which is a $4 billion project. So it's not a small investment. One of the exciting things too, I will say that this legislature made that possible in a lot of the work that you all did beforehand in ensuring that we have the right regulatory framework through our statutes to be desirable for projects like Terra Powers. We now have a section that's on advanced reactors that allows to create certainty in the process. There isn't additional permitting required in the state of Wyoming in addition to the NRC. So the NRC is taking the lead both at the federal level, but also at a state level. I identify here for you all of our state agencies that are working together routinely. We have additional ones that do provide additional information to us, but all of these state agencies that are listed, we meet monthly to coordinate and talk about what each other are doing. And then we do maintain a regular report that agencies feed into in between those meetings, just so that we know what is going on. That includes work that DEQ is doing with Terra Power, NRC and DOE on the regulatory and permitting side. WYDOT on transportation issues, whether that's adding a turn lane that's going to be necessary, or WYDOT and Game and Fish, on wildlife management. How we are building education and training and making sure that we have a workforce in Wyoming that's ready to be part of the project. Working with our communities on what they need for capacity building, because our community needs to be ready if we're going to also be able to support the Terra Power project. The work that the agencies are doing, yes, it started around the Terra Power project, but as Randall mentioned, the WEA also is working hard at putting out this framework, and they've got a lot of efforts going on there at the WEA to look at our generation, our supply chain, and our value chain, and the needs there, and how all of these agencies fit into the work that they're doing, fits into making sure that we are not just receiving benefits from the Terra Power project, but from the nuclear industry as a whole. How does Wyoming actually get more out of our engagement in the nuclear industry? We have a number of additional partners, but I just highlight a few here for you. There's the Idaho National Labs. They have collaborations with both the WEA and the School of Energy Resources, but then they also have been really engaging with all of our communities and open to doing tours and other things to help us with the education component. The state and the federal government are collaborating in an entity called the Interagency Working Group for Coal Impacted Communities. So that's the IWG. It's more than just around nuclear. And that's really looking at how we can understand all of these billions of dollars that the federal government has for grants, and making sure that we are getting that information appropriately out in Wyoming and trying to assist our Wyoming communities and private sector in getting some of those dollars. Manufacturing works, and then the WIE, which is the Wyoming Innovative Entrepreneurs, are working closely with us on ensuring that all of our businesses in Wyoming get to take advantage of this renewal of the nuclear industry. The National Association of Regulatory Commissioners and the National Association of State Energy Officers have a work stream going around grid reliability that our WEA and PSC are included in. And then I did include the South Lincoln Community Economic Development Corporation. They're really who we have been working very closely with on the Terra Power, specifically on that project. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of some of the things that we have been engaging in since August of 2022 until now. So there are a lot of meetings, a lot of events, a lot of engagements. All of them, though, I will say are very important because they allow us to have information sharing and also have resulted in additional partnerships or educating other companies within the nuclear industry about what Wyoming is about and getting them engaged in pursuing potentially coming here to Wyoming. And then these next few slides, really, I think Travis will go in a lot more detail on them, but I did want to include the information here for you. You all have heard a bit about the agreement state status that Wyoming has with the NRC. HB 61 from this last session, the work that you all did on that is part of this agreement state status. In this space, the DEQ does have the ability to oversee the permitting and the regulating of the uranium industry, which is very important as far as reducing time and costs for that industry, which I believe Mr. Detail will talk about in more detail. The Wyoming State Geological Survey tracks information that goes into the CREG. And this information is important in understanding the economics of the industry. And so the data that we have here is from the State Geological Survey provided, and then Erin Campbell is online in case you all have some more detailed questions that she can address. I think Travis will cover some of this, so I won't do it in too much detail. There's some information there for you on the historical production. So Wyoming began producing in 1951. And it has, we have had a decline in that production. And in the last couple of years, we'd say our production was negligible. If you go to the next slide. So you can see kind of when we began and then our peaks and then now where we are. You will see that that the EIA did estimate that Wyoming has about 220 million pounds of recoverable uranium, but that is price dependent, right? So we need to have a price on uranium at about $50 per pound, and that if the price of uranium goes up, we actually increase more than double our amount of recoverable uranium. Go to the next slide. So when we talk about price, you'll see here is a chart of where prices have been and where we expect them to be. So right now they're sitting around that $50, which makes it attractive at the moment. The CREG does have a forecast through 2028 that will be at $50 per pound, and then rising into that $70 per pound in the later years of the forecast. We need them to be sustained in order for us to have these operations restart, which Mr. Detail will go into more detail about, along with talking about the severance taxes. So he will discuss a little bit about how that sliding scale works and for the industry. The next slide. So on production forecast, this is a high level that the State Geological Survey has put together for us. We have 2 mines that are currently restarting. We don't expect any significant quantities this year. We'll start seeing those next year. And then each of them have contracts that run for different lengths of time. So we will see them having production for the next decade or longer, hopefully. And then you see the forecast for 2025 to 2028 that we can see a steady 1.4 million pounds per year if only those 2 mines restart. When we talk about the dollars, if we can get into that $70, hopefully we'd have additional mines restarting, which then means ideally that we'll have additional production of uranium out of Wyoming. This figure just gives you an idea. I know folks yesterday and today have talked a bit about where uranium comes from. And so I just wanted you all to have this chart so you can see currently where in the world uranium is being produced and the percentages of where it comes from. Finally, importantly, Senator Barrasso has been a champion on some legislation that has been critical. There are 2 of them, the uranium reserve and then the high assay low enriched uranium, the HALEU legislation. So first on the uranium reserve, this was critical in I believe getting our mines restarted. In 2021, under the Consolidated Appropriations, DOE was given $75 million in order to purchase uranium and then hopefully stockpile that, but then put it into the marketplace. 4 of our companies in Wyoming were awarded contracts out of that 75 million, 1 company out of Texas. And then a portion of it also went to ConverDyn. ConverDyn is the conversion facility. So for uranium, there is the mining, then there's the conversion, and then there's the enrichment. And so having a place that can actually convert the yellow cake is important. And so that was that $14 million to ConverDyn. Then on the enrichment side, that's the next program, this HALEU program. DOE has established a consortium which includes entities that are involved in the enrichment process. So TerraPower is involved in that along with and other companies that are interested in purchasing HALEU. There's a desire to create a stockpile of HALEU because these advanced nuclear reactors that are coming online need HALEU in order to work. The United States currently does not produce HALEU. And so the HALEU that the United States has is not for commercial use. So this is a very important program. The Department of Energy has did a request for information last year, and they were supposed to put out a procurement for this process, and we're in the process of waiting on that. They were supposed to have done it at the end of last year. We did have discussions with Dr. Huff, who runs the DOE Nuclear Energy Office, and their office is hoping to see that come out in the next few weeks, and so are we. And the last thing I'd like to say is I feel very privileged that our office gets to work with so many amazing individuals across our state agencies. Our state agencies have been very focused on doing what they can for Wyoming and ensuring that Wyoming is a leader in nuclear, and that is where we are now. So we were a couple years ago not in the nuclear industry, and now we are being discussed around the world as the place where nuclear is happening. And companies tell us regularly that they're very interested in being in Wyoming. And a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the people that work in our state agencies. They're solution minded. They want to ensure that we can have the industry here. And they want to make sure that, I think it was Jennifer from DEQ just talked about in permitting, that we do what we have to do to ensure that we are protecting the environment and doing other things, but we're not getting in our own way. And so I just wanted to tell you all that we have really, really great employees across the agencies working on this issue. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer? Go ahead.
Just a quick question. How long does it take to process HALEU? I mean, from getting it out of the ground to making it? And do we even have the capability here to do that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tarver, I think there are some other people probably in the room that are more versed in that. What I will say in the conversations that I've had there are 2 companies in the United States that are enriching for the LEU, which is currently used in the existing nuclear fleet. Those companies have said that they can be up and ready to produce HALEU by 2029 if this RFP can get out the door by September.
Good. Right here. And then down to Representative Heiner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you may have mentioned this, and it might be a Mr. D type question, but what is the number of closed, or I think you're using the term standby mode, mines currently in Wyoming? What do we have?
I've got
Mr.
that right
Dekai?
on top of my comments if you want me to roll into them.
Well, let's hold it then, and we're
Yeah,
gonna
we
have
can
you
wait. We can wait. I
take
just
the
wanted
in-depth
to-
dive into mining.
Yes,
Okay,
that's.
first, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Thompson, thank you for the presentation. Very, very good. Well done. You mentioned that we're anticipating getting up to 1.4 million pounds per year in the next couple of years. What percentage of that is total consumption here in the United States domestically, how much we use? Are we going to be a major player, or, is that just a small sliver of what's actually consumed in the United States?
Ms. Thompson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, as far as what the percentage is, I might ask Aaron Campbell, who's online, or even Mr. Detai, they might be able to do those numbers. What I will say is there are other attempts to try to ensure that the US market is growing. Senator Brasso, the governor, have been calling for a ban on uranium. And I do know that the Senate did take a vote on that to ban uranium from certain foreign players that will assist in that market creation. And Mr. Detai.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, it's very, very small. The uranium is sold, it goes out into the global market, and then, the fuel basically comes from Russia. So it's very, very small.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Mr. Detai, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Travis Detai. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. I've got my comments sort of scripted today because there's a lot of information I want to give to you. And I will be very noticing and cognizant of the time as well. So just a little reminder of who we are for the committee. The Mining Association is the statewide trade association for our state's mining companies. We represent 33 member companies that produce coal, trona, bentonite, uranium, lignite, and companies developing gold and rare earth deposits. And we also represent over 100 associate member companies, the companies that supply and service the mines, and one electricity co-op and one advanced nuclear power company, who I think everyone knows in this room right now. So it's a pleasure to be with you today to update you on some of the things going on in the industry. There's a lot going on, and let you know sort of some of the issues that we're facing as we ramp up, because we are ramping up, and that's good news. So to answer your question, Representative Lawley, the state of Wyoming is currently home to 6 permitted and operational uranium mines. These are UR Energy's Lost Creek Mine, Strata Energy's Ross Mine, Cameco's Smith Ranch and North Butte Mines, Energy Fuels Nicholas Ranch, and Uranium Energy Corporation's Willow Mine. We have one conventional mill in standby. That is at Sweetwater, the Sweetwater Uranium Mill. That is in standby in the event that down the line somewhere in the future we mine conventionally, that the ore would be taken and processed and milled there at the Sweetwater Uranium Mill. In addition to those operating mines, and I would to further on to that, they're all pretty much in standby right now. Those sites that I just producing negligible amounts of uranium just to keep their equipment going, basically. We have several projects currently in the permitting stage, several applied expansions, and we've got some things that have been approved but not constructed yet. So production, as was stated earlier, in 2022 was negligible. I think the figure that was cited in the presentation was 26,000 pounds. My members self-reported to me 33,000 pounds. But again, that's negligible. That's basically no production. It's down from 4.3 million pounds of production about a decade ago, and a peak of about 12 million pounds of production in the late 1970s. Our total reserve is about 450 million pounds. And what I'd like to state is if we flip the switch and everything started running right now, if demand went up, if everybody was fully staffed, our companies are permitted and licensed to produce about 13 million pounds a year annually. And that's in situ and possibly conventional mining as well. And this is important. At the recent research explorations for nuclear energy in Wyoming, their academic workshop they had the School of Energy Resources held. The director of the nuclear fuel cycle at the Idaho National Labs noted that Wyoming does indeed have the capacity to supply the necessary amounts of uranium needed, in particular if we were to pursue building a domestic high assay, low enrichment uranium industry to fuel the next generation of nuclear reactors. So we do have it and we can produce it. And I think that's key as we move forward, as we try to pursue this moonshot of building a new nuclear industry in the United States. So the industry employed 142 people at the end of 22. That's an increase of about 20 from the previous year, down from over 500 in 2013, a decade ago, and down from 5,300 in the late 1970s. And the payroll submitted to me by my operators was over $13 million, 13.9, so $14 million in payroll. The industry generated an estimated 585,000 in revenue and taxes and royalties to the state in 2022. And as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, severance tax in uranium right now is currently on a sliding scale. That was put into effect in 2021, I believe. So basically what it is when the price of uranium based on the two accepted standards is less than $30 a pound, the severance tax is zero. When it goes on a sliding scale based on price until it gets to $60, and then it's 5%. The current price, as I looked at today, is $40.74 a pound. And so the tax rate right now that they're charging for what they are producing, again, that negligible rate is they're paying 2%. This sliding scale will expire unless it's extended at the end of 26, and the rate will revert back to where it was a flat 4%. So that's where we are on severance taxes. And, we'll kind of keep watching that. If we do go up over $60, which everyone hopes for, everybody wins for a while. And then we can let that expire and go back down to 4%.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Detai, at the end of the 70s, when you mentioned we were kind of at our peak production, was the tax rate then 4% too, or has it changed?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, that's an excellent question, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find that out for you.
Okay, answer to come. Any further questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, question for Mr. Detai. It feels like we're swimming upstream as a salmon with regards to production of uranium in the state of Wyoming. Is it a viable, and I guess for a personal opinion, is it a viable commodity, or maybe not a commodity in terms of production within the state of Wyoming? We're looking at over 90% of everything else in uranium production is outside the United States. Are we a viable candidate to really come to fruition? Because, man, we've been talking and building and messing around, rather, trying to mine uranium for decades.
Where do we stand, Mr. Detai?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, I think that's a great question, and I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit later. But one of the things that I think it is the biggest thing is we are in competition with state-sponsored producers. It's the government of Russia. It's the government of China. The Australia gets federal help. And I think in order for us to increase our competitiveness, we're probably going to need a little federal help from the government. And I think we're seeing the door crack open on that a little bit with the creation of the domestic energy or the domestic uranium supply. And frankly, our standards are higher than anybody else's in the world. Our environmental standards, our safety standards, and that costs money. And it comes to be a question of, whether you, as a consumer of uranium, are you going to rely on Russian supplies? Are you going to rely on supplies from Kazakhstan? Or are you going to look at it as, hey, we do it right, we protect our environment, and we're going to go over here? So I think that plays into it as well. But the answer to your question, I say yes, we can compete.
Well, just to follow up, with the federal help you offered, wouldn't there have been a step for the Biden administration to list uranium on the critical mineral list, but unfortunately left that completely off?
Mr. Detai.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And that's a head scratcher. We are still working with the federal delegation to get that listed because it belongs there. It is a critical mineral. It's a national security issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Detai, thank you for your presentation. It's always a wealth of information when you come and present for this committee. I thank you for that. And it was interesting how you pointed out the employment back in the 70s in this industry. What a storyline that is, going from 5,400 employees down to almost nothing, and how we've let this be outsourced to other sources. And now we're in a crunch because we don't have a local domestic source. So that hopefully we learn from this lesson, what happens when we go worldwide. But with those mines that we have available, as we're trying to develop this domestic source of uranium, are any of those mines owned by international corporations?
Mr. Detai.
Mr. Chairman, yes. We have mines that are mainly out of Canada, but the answer is yes. We have some of the juniors are owned by here domestically, but Canada, Australia, and domestically with some of the juniors. And one of the reasons I would cite that you see those employment numbers drop so dramatically from the 70s. Not obviously the big factor was the crash of the nuclear industry in the United States, due largely to the 3 Mile Island incident. But we were mining it conventionally back then as well, with large open pit mines, and the technology has evolved so that our mining right now is done in situ, which is basically a well field setup, and it just simply requires significantly less people. Now, going back to my earlier comment, what I said is if everything was flipped and switched and we could mine 13 million pounds, you would probably have to move to some conventional mining to make all that.
Any follow-up? We're good? All right. Any further questions? Mr. Deti, if you were to.
So while the economics of each company are different, the prices have reached a point to where we've mentioned that at least 2 and possibly 3 companies are planning to resume production in the latter half of the year. And our operators are actively hiring, and we will look to add about another 150 jobs as production restarts, and possibly another 175 on top of that if prices remain strong or increase. And these jobs range from field operators, engineers, geologists, drillers, lab technicians, mechanics, electricians, well field construction and maintenance, small equipment operators, plant operators, administrative staff, and geophysical loggers. So we're looking to hire everybody right now. And depending on the position, the salary ranges for these jobs are between $50,000 and $135,000 a year, depending on what they're hiring. But like most, and here's where the challenges come in, like most around the country today, our uranium companies are encountering challenges in hiring. Most of the companies are sacking a lack of qualified applicants in a small labor pool. And STEM positions, geologists, STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they're proving particularly difficult to fill. Generally, the labor pool has very little uranium mining experience, and retention has proven difficult for those that they do hire. And a unique factor in our uranium industry that is off-putting, I think, to potential new workers is having to drive, 2 to 3 miles a day to get out to the mine site and back, and that's difficult for folks, and that's proving a factor. Contractors that we're working with today are experiencing the same issues as far as hiring and retention issues. We are experiencing significant supply chain issues and inflation issues, and they are in some cases significant. Costs are higher, necessary products are harder to get, and in some cases are not available. Deliveries have been slow and they are unpredictable. And there are extremely long lead times on certain things such as electrical equipment. Drilling supplies such as PVC casing, mud products, and bits have become very expensive and also have long lead times to acquire. And issues exist in acquiring motor control centers, transformers, and specific instrumentation for the in situ mine sites. One of the things that has come into become a significant problem in recent months is cement. Cement for well casings has become very difficult to find. And in fact, one operator let me know that their current supply of cement will no longer be manufactured because it does not meet new EPA regulations. So go figure. An alternative is yet to be identified. Pumps and other equipment that used to be off the shelf are now having to be ordered with long lead times, and freight is proving extremely expensive and difficult to schedule. So, as things look to be a little bit brighter, we're still having issues coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and with the significant inflation that we've experienced here in the last year and a half, 2 years. On the regulatory side, I would say that generally the industry working relationship with the DEQ is very good. As a reminder, and has been noted in this committee several times, our agreement state program with the NRC has proven very successful. It has cut permitting times and costs in half, and this is great for the industry. There is, and I appreciate the comments from the previous in the previous presentation. We do have concerns about staffing and retention at DEQ. Representative Conrad, in my discussions with Land Quality yesterday, I think they're down 5, and we're working to reclassify 1. You know, it's the agents, the industry needs a fully staffed and functional and efficient DEQ for management of our permits. That's probably one of the biggest regulatory, improvements that we look for. When you're all up and running, everyone's doing their job, things run smooth. And that's one of the things. So being able to recruit, to pay, and to retain those people at DEQ is critical for us. And so I would kind of add on to what has been said before and what the committee has said. We've got to have that agency staffed, and we've got to pay them well and let them do the work that we need them to do.
Go ahead. And then you're close to wrapping up.
I'm very close to wrapping up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. I just wanted to follow on that thought and we've had this conversation in the past, and one of the concepts that I think you've raised over time is that there's no cost savings associated with a reduction in positions at DEQ or an understaffing at DEQ, because that delay ends up basically reducing the revenue that is paying for those positions in the long run. Can you provide a little more insight into your experience there?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yeah, I agree. I think that's right. There's a lot out of our control. I'll cite the uranium program and the coal program in particular, to where we have primacy. Well, we have primacy, but we've got to get the work done here at the state level, and we can do it. The folks, Wyoming folks, are better suited to do that. But if we don't have enough people and we don't have enough, and the time, and it's delayed because, they're just overwhelmed, the feds can take those programs back, and nobody wants that. But so to your question, I guess I would say is having good people, having the right amount of people to do the work that we need them to do, to speed up production so that we can do the work that we need to do to generate the revenue that the state needs. And I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of rambled a little bit, but
Go ahead.
so Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time.
Wait.
Oh,
right there.
And a follow-up in the same vein, on workforce services, I also serve on education committee, and we are very concerned about that. That's one of the places my two committees overlap strongly. I share your concerns about that, but one of the things I really would love to learn more about is what are the industries doing? What's their strategy and how we can work together to address this issue? Because there's no confusion in my mind about the importance of the issue, but how do we work effectively together? And so I start with the question of what is the uranium industry's strategy to address that problem? What's our role in that, and what are other things we should be doing? So you may not can answer that.
Well, we're going to have him answer that as his concluding comment.
Yeah. So today fully, but that's a conversation. We need to go to that a phase of this conversation on workforce development. Thank you.
I'm happy to have that conversation, and we're in touch with workforce development as well to try to, we're facing the same issue, staffing up our mines as well. So I'll skip the federal stuff. We've got some concerns at the federal level. We always do, and I will skip that.
Those are endless.
What's that?
Those are endless, but go ahead.
Okay.
Let's close it
But
out.
we always have those. We do have 4 companies that were contracted to supply into the domestic uranium reserve, and that's a good thing. The industry is actively working with the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming, specifically with the Nuclear Energy Research Center in particular. And we've had productive meetings on where the School of Energy Resources can help identify those research areas to help the industry. And we have identified some of those, and we're hoping to move forward on some of those. And I'm going to hit on the issue of safety, because Wyoming's mines are the safest in the world. It's not just a priority, it's a value. And we will award our safety awards to 3 companies this year. Chemical Resources, Strata Energy, and Uranium Energy Corporation will present these at the WMA convention next month in Sheridan, which I would like to remind you, you're all invited to attend. And in closing, I would submit to you that while operating conditions remain difficult, there's a great amount of optimism in the industry today, and the challenges we're facing are not insurmountable. And we really appreciate the support we get from this committee, from the full legislature, from Governor Gordon and his team, and the University of Wyoming, and the School of Energy Resources, and the Wyoming Energy Authority. And the interest in nuclear power in the United States as it grows in Wyoming in particular, we think the future looks bright for the industry at this point in time. And if there are any other questions, Mr. Chairman, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Let's double check with Mr. Luthi. We didn't give you a chance to speak. Anything else you'd like to add?
I'm sure I could, but I won't.
Okay. We're going to time this so we can be on the bus out there, folks. I will say, we recently had a presentation on the nuclear power proposed for Kemmer. It was a professional presentation. Well done, very receptive on all sides and spending a lot of time in this community. They are excited about their future again. And so just like I respect all communities around the state, I respect this one for their future. With that, the bus is pulled up, but a little housekeeping real quick before we close out. Lunches from Rocky Mountain Power and Terra Power are out just out to the left of the door as you go out. And there's enough here for this committee and for staff. And Commissioner Conley, I will donate my lunch to you if you will make sure you're on the bus and show us which gates to go through so we're not held up. Okay, thank you.
And yep, Mr. Chairman, one quick thing. Senator Ellis, in response to your question, in the 70s, just in a nutshell, the tax rate started at 2%. I think in 1977, 78, it went up to 5.5%. By 1988, it was back down to 2%.
Okay, thank you. We're adjourned until